The COVID-19 pandemic wasn't just precedent-setting because of state-imposed stay-at-home orders that in Illinois shut down businesses that the governor deemed were non-essential and kept kids from school and a whole host of other things. But the pandemic was also unprecedented because of the amount of censorship that happened. Everything from being unable to talk about alternative treatments for COVID-19 to even being able to say, the COVID virus may have come from a lab. Well, several states sued the federal government for what they say was the federal government censoring the free speech of Americans by putting pressure on social media companies. Well, yesterday, after a 4th of July ruling from a district court in the federal court system slapping down the federal government, saying that they can't communicate with social media companies, you had an appeals court essentially reverse that, and a hearing yesterday. Somebody very intimate with the knowledge of what happened yesterday and this case in general joins us now. Jeanette Brown, she is a civil rights attorney, and she joins us here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop. Jeanette, thanks for taking time with us, and let's get to the crux of this. Give us, I guess, the arguments that were heard yesterday in the federal courts.
Sure. Thanks for having me. And the preliminary injunction has been stayed. It hasn't been reversed. Yesterday, what was presented to the Fifth Circuit was arguments about whether or not the preliminary injunction should go back into effect. It was stayed administratively while the appeals court hears the merits of our claims that there was censorship. Not only the state suing, but we represent 4 out of 5 private individuals who are suing. And the arguments essentially are, aside from some technicalities, whether or not the government has crossed a line from what they call persuasion to something more, whether it's coercion, significant encouragement, partnership with the social media companies. There's a lot of different ways to get to what ultimately is converting private action to state action. So that's part of what the court heard. The other sort of on the merits part of what the court heard is whether or not the injunction, which doesn't actually completely bar the government from talking to these social media companies, it only bars certain contact. Government, there's 8 or so carve-outs. The government can still pursue crime and a lot of the things that it expressed concern about. But the question is whether or not the injunction that was issued by the district court judge is too broad or too difficult for the government to understand.
So obviously, this is still ongoing, an issue that was raised by several states and individuals. What kind of harm's done when somebody's free speech is limited in this capacity?
Well, there's very strong precedent that what the government has done here is chill speech. And there's very strong precedent in the cases that is irreparable harm. When your government starts to stop you from speaking your mind, and stop people from hearing dissenting viewpoints, that's a significant harm, not just to the person who's been censored, but frankly to all of our citizens in the Republic.
Jeanette Brown joins us. She is a civil liberties attorney, and the case about the federal government working with social media companies, some saying that they were pressured to limit speech. And I tell you, Jeanette, even this program, whenever there were vaccine mandates being imposed on police across the state, we had a segment where we were talking with the Fraternal Order of Police, and they questioned the effectiveness of vaccines. And even that video was taken down from YouTube, despite it being about a newsworthy event of lawsuits and the back and forth and so on. So we've seen this across the board, but it's not just about chilling free speech, and I'm not sure if this is part of the overall conversation, but even the question of possible election interference. You had that Hunter Biden laptop story that was censored before the 2022 election. Does that fit into this overall issue of, it's not just the COVID policies and whatnot, but it's also other things that maybe the government puts pressure on social media companies to limit, to get out to the American people?
Oh, absolutely. Our complaint focuses not just on various topics and viewpoints that were censored related to COVID, but specifically the election engineering or the election censorship with regard to the State Department, the FBI, the White House, lots of parts of the executive branch interfering with and providing direction to the social media companies.
So what are the next steps here? Of course, we've got the appeals hearing happening, and whether or not the administrative stay is going to be lifted and the government will be prevented while it plays out further. Is this thing going all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court?
Probably. I suspect that it will. I suspect that regardless of what the Fifth Circuit rules, a losing party would take it up to the Fifth Circuit. We obviously believe very strongly the government's crossed the line and needs to be put in its place to understand what is coercive or significant encouragement for regulated entities. And I'm certain the government would appeal. Besides that, the case at the district court is going to proceed on the merits. This was just a preliminary injunction. There's more discovery to do. And regardless of what happens on this particular appeal track, the case is going to move forward.
And there's been a lot of discovery already. Very interested in the outcome of this. What kind of, payment or, trying to make people whole? How do you make somebody whole if it's found that their free speech rights were violated?
Yeah, well, the problem with suing the federal government is most of the time, particularly in this area, you don't get damages. So in terms of making someone whole, what you get is sort of a vindication, recognizing that their rights were barred. And more importantly for our clients, for the plaintiffs in this case, you put a stop to what's happening so that they can continue to speak freely without censoring themselves or being censored, and representing other people. We represent doctors. They want to free the medical field from censorship by the government.
Jeanette Brown, greatly appreciate you taking the time with us. We'll obviously want to get an update sometime here soon, so hopefully we can connect again, and be safe out there, all right?
Thank you so much for having me.
It is Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk.